Hi. In this video, we're going to be talking about a project management topic, and that is specifically how to plan a digital transformation program using OpenCRVS. We're talking about effective digital transformation, not simply rolling out a system in isolation. So what does this really take? We're talking about 4 phases generally when we talk about digital transformation. And there may be different words that are used for these different types of phases. The first phase we talk about is proof of concept. If you haven't already, please do watch the video on this topic. Now, in the proof of concept, within 8 to 12 weeks, you're going to configure the core product with basic country inputs to prove that OpenCRVS is applicable for the country context and also to use it as a way of identifying additional system requirements. The next phase is a pilot phase. Now, during this pilot phase, we're hoping to learn as much as we can to inform our scale-up plans. Pilot sometimes has a dirty reputation in terms of pilotitis, just testing things for a period of time and then it not going anywhere. But in this case, we're talking about conducting a pilot to learn and to inform an effective scale-up strategy. So you're going to be testing out OpenCRVS in a range of settings: urban, rural, potentially in health facilities, perhaps starting out in the community, etc., and proving that it works. We're also going to be identifying improvements, product improvements, and deployment improvements. And we're going to be refining a scalable, integrated rollout plan. And we're going to be talking about those integrated components in just a few minutes. The next phase is scale up. And this is the goal of this phase is to roll out the system across the whole of the country. We're going to be scaling up these digital surfaces across the country using the integrated components that were tested and proven in the pilot. This is really important. During the pilot, when you're testing at a small scale, you're going to identify things that need improvement. When you go to scale up, you're going to experience other challenges. And the reason why we do this in phases is so that we don't experience all these challenges at one time, but rather improve on a continuous basis. And finally, once the system is working across the country and people are comfortable with it, there's a period, hopefully for a very long time, of operational support. And this is when the solution is being managed and maintained for the long term, where small little bugs that are identified can be fixed via hot fixes, and also regular product upgrades can be conducted, as and when the OpenCRVS core team provides new features and functionality, and perhaps additional technical and back-end features, as well as perhaps new features that the country has identified. So to recap, we're talking about 4 phases in this digital transformation program that you're going to be using as a vehicle to roll out OpenCRVS. That's the proof of concept. Let's see whether it's going to work and identify requirements. That's piloting, that's testing the solution in different places to inform modality for scale up. Scale up, making sure it goes across the country and it's working effectively at scale. And finally, operational support, making sure that users aren't alone in the ongoing operations. Here's another view of what I've just explained with a few different time periods. Please note that for every country, these phases are going to include different time periods depending on the scope, obviously, of each phase. So you can see here in the top left, the proof of concept. That's gathering the requirements, it's configuring the product, and it's testing that system with users to identify those requirements. The pilot here, you can see some phases as well. We may have identified some additional requirements that are required to be built. So you build those. In parallel, you're going to be preparing for the piloting, and that includes a number of components, including preparation of training materials, change management, ensuring that everyone has buy-in, and of course, testing the product. And finally, you've got a pilot review, and then you can see scale up 1, 2, this could be even 3 years depending on the size of the country. Then we're talking about planning for scale, reflecting on what we've learned from the pilot, and looking ahead about how we can reach the rest of the country. And one final view of this planning period, slightly more detailed activity plan here, shows the first, the piloting phase specifically, because this is really where you're going to learn the most about what the country needs, how to improve things over time, and preparation for scale. So this work plan assumes that a proof of concept has already been conducted and a project has been established to first pilot, then scale up, and then mobilize operational support. So we start the first activity up in the top is project establishment. We need to make sure that we've got the right team in place, we've got governance for the project, and everyone understands the scope and the objectives of the project so that there's a North Star in all key activities. Very soon after that, we're going to be setting up the production infrastructure. Now, for each country, that's going to be different. It might be on-premise, it might be in the cloud, and you can understand more if you watch the infrastructure setup videos. In parallel to that, we're going to be conducting business analysis. Now, this business analysis is getting a full understanding of the full scope of requirements for the country. Now, while OpenCRVS is very rich in features and functionality, there may be gaps in those features and functionality for the specific country, and we will be designing and developing those components aligned with the core product during this piloting phase. You don't need to wait for a complete product before you start piloting. In fact, you can start the process and learn, and as you go, provide additional features and functionality as they're ready. Following that business analysis, you're going to see a number of activities coming into really kind of the fourth month here of preparatory activities. Here, you've got phase one, install and configure. So we have the infrastructure ready. We have a version of the product that is ready to be installed on this infrastructure. And then we're going to test it, make sure that we're fully quality assuring that so that when it does go live, there's very few issues that users are going to experience. In parallel with that, we're looking at the development of standard operating procedures. Now, while the system can support business processes, we need to define those business processes and those service delivery models and detail what the standard operating procedures are for different actors. Now, some business processes are going to start in the office, and you're going to register, for instance, a birth or death in the office. Others are going to perhaps start at the community level or a health facility. Different standard operating procedures are required to effectively train people and create a standard for service delivery. So after you've created those SOPs, you're also going to be preparing for training. Now, in each country, this is going to be different. In some countries, there are slide decks that are used for training. We've also used training videos so that we can demonstrate the features and functionality, also in different languages to people across the country. This is also quite a cost-effective way of using this as a training tool. So rather than having people provide these demonstrations in person, they can show these at the beginning of training sessions and then focus on hands-on exercises. In parallel to this training preparation, we're also going to be preparing for deployment. And when we say deployment, we mean the activities that it requires to install, to set up and run the solution in sites across the country. We're thinking about deployment checklists. Does each site have the hardware they require? Do they have the connectivity they require? Do they need a backup generator, etc.? All these really practical things that are relevant for deployment of the product. Now, if we step back a little bit, while we've been preparing all those things, we also need to go back a little bit further to the beginning to consider change management. Now, we know that the majority of digital transformation programs around the world fail. And one of the biggest reasons for their failure is that the change isn't managed and people don't buy in and take on the new product or service. So thinking about people's needs, their wants, their desires, their potential doubts about using a new digital system and new services that might increase accountability and transparency. We need to think about the motivations of each of the individuals across every stage of the organisations that are affected and create a change management strategy and approach that takes these head on. It's about creating clear change communication methods. It's about creating a group of change champions to ensure that the solution is adopted in a positive manner. And you can see then after that preparation, the change communications are going to last for a really long time because you don't just tell people about a change once, you're going to continuously tell them in a manner that's going to be accepted to them. Before we start this pilot, the phase 1 of the pilot, we are also going to prepare our continuous improvement strategy and approach. Now, this includes defining the key performance indicators, creating tools that are going to help you monitor these indicators, and putting in place a team to be able to roll this out. Because the pilot, like I said previously, is all about learning. And to learn, we want to be able to do that in a structured way. So what indicators are you going to monitor? How are we going to look at those in the system? Are we also going to be conducting surveys? And how are we going to be doing those on an ongoing basis? Or are we also going to be observing these services to see how they're working? That preparation is really important because with these indicators, and if we're tracking them, you can see whether the goals and the objectives of the government are being fulfilled with the introduction of the solution and with the deployment approach that you're taking. Also, in advance of the pilot starting, we're going to be setting up the service support. So we're going to be designing a user support approach. How are users going to raise issues? Who are they going to raise them? Via what channels? And what are the mechanisms by which these are going to be fixed? That's also a preparatory activity. Now then, all these preparatory activities do take some time, but remember that these change messages are really, really important. We want people to be ready. We want also the teams who are going to be rolling out the training, preferably in-country staff, to be really comfortable and confident with the system and for it to fulfill a minimum set of requirements. So then we're going to start piloting. This is a limited scale rollout. We're going to be testing in urban and rural areas. And we think that's really important because we want to be able to prove that it works across the country in different contexts. We're going to be conducting our continuous improvement activities. We're going to be monitoring those KPIs. And on an ongoing basis, you're going to have regular meetings to review the results and to refine the approach over time and as we scale. During this, you can see, obviously, there's operational support, and those are levels 1, 2, and 3. And in parallel, you're also going to see phase 2 full functionality being designed, built, and tested. That includes integrations. So we don't want to wait for all these features and functionality to be built. We want to consider doing this in a phased manner. So in parallel to those first priority requirements being fulfilled and pilot phase 1 being conducted, we're designing, building, and integrating with other systems before we start pilot phase 2. And that includes the full scope of all features. In this example, you can see, for instance, marriage registrations being added, perhaps health and ID integrations, and so on and so forth. By doing this in a phased approach, also, you can consider training different groups of people. You can consider getting offices ready and using the system before adding in active registration models, which obviously adds complexity. So making sure that the pilot has these phases, it means that you can learn in different ways and not introduce all the complexity and all the change at the same time. So after this phase 2 of design and build, we're going to be upgrading the system and then you're going to be testing out all these things again. We've put in here for another 6 months. It might be in the sites that have already been rolled out to and in some additional sites with the full scope of requirements. And at the end of this work plan, which is really just for the pilot phase, we've got an 18-month pilot phase work plan noted in this slide. Then we're going to be looking at scale-up planning and rollout. So we're going to be reflecting on everything we've learned. We're going to be refining the training materials, the user support materials, our deployment approach, the checklists that we use to ensure that sites are ready, that people know we're coming, have we communicated with them, etc., etc. And then we have a really great deployment approach and system ready to be scaled. You can also see on this plan some yellow stars, and this is just highlighting that the OpenCRVS organization is available to support organizations and countries in a number of different of these areas if you're interested in talking about our support. Thanks very much, and see you in the next video.